All right, everyone. Welcome to The Nature of Death. Today we're talking... that's not the name of the podcast. That would be a sick podcast name, but that's actually just the name of today's episode. Actually, because this is just the first episode, you guys can tell me if you want the podcast to be called The Nature of Death. If that's picked up, we will change it to The Nature of Death. But right now, I'm calling it the Creative File Podcast. Welcome to our first episode, and today we are talking exactly that. The nature of death and what it means to be a creative in today's space. And I'll be talking about some things that are happening in the public right now in regards to death and some of the things that are bothering us. And if you're looking at this wondering why is this guy talking to a remote control, it is because I don't have a microphone. But I like the aesthetic, so I'm going for it. I know it's ridiculous, there's no actual microphone on here, but just like everything else we watch, it's all illusions anyway. So let's just go for it. Okay, so there's no guest today. I was not able to get anyone. Actually, that's not true. I was able to get people, but I wanted to do a solo episode today, just as I talk about the nature of death. But before we dive in, I just want to encourage you to take a moment to follow, like, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps the show grow, and it means I can bring more incredible people and support the incredible creative journey we're on. So go ahead and hit that follow and like button right now if you haven't already, and let's just dive right in. So today there's a couple of things going on. It's September 21st, 2025, and some of the rumblings going on. This is about Charlie Kirk and the girl getting murdered on the train are the two things I want to talk about. First, let's talk about Charlie, okay? Because I made a little video about it, and I actually don't necessarily want to dive too much into it because I'm not a political person at all, right? I don't necessarily think politics are the happiest, healthiest environment to cultivate a winning personality. Frankly, I feel like the nature of the beast is designed to create chaos and confusion. And so as I've seen, and I've just never met anyone who is really engendered and really involved in politics who's happy or has anything that I truly want to emulate in their character or personality. I know that might sound harsh, but that's really true. Everyone I meet in politics personally, I've seen that they're typically very stressed out, confused, angry, and they're putting a tremendous amount of energy on things they can't control, and they're just blaming other people. And I think it creates a mindset of disempowerment. Now, I'm not going to say all movements have been like that, and I'm not going to judge the whole political complex with a blanket statement, but in my experience, in my short life on this blue orb we call Earth, I've generally seen that where I could invest my time, it's generally not spent best on politics, and it's simply as that. Having said all that, I thought Charlie Kirk was a bit of a douche, if I'm being honest. Yet, in spite of all that, even though some of maybe his politics, I actually had, not his views on politics, but maybe I would probably vote more on some policies that would lean towards Carly more than not, right? Like his views on personal views on abortion, a lot of things like that. I might have a personal take that the surface would appear to agree with him, but I think just in general his whole approach, I did not like it at all. Every time I saw his content, I was always just told myself, man, someone needs to punch that guy in the face, just because I felt like he was very invalidating. He didn't listen to people. I felt like he was just part of the political machine. He was just kind of fueling the problem. And in spite of all that, when his death happened, all I felt was this tremendous sadness, and I thought to myself, man, that sucks. And it wasn't because of anything in particular about him. It was just the idea that someone could get murdered, and then in my hometown of all places, right? So I'm from Utah, terrible place. I hate it. That's why I'm not there. And I'm sure Charlie and his family are not big fans of it either right now. But putting that aside, it was I just think it was a terrible tragedy that happened, and that's the only way I could process it. And I'll give you something to sort of contrast and juxtapose this with, because I'd also heard about that girl who got killed on the train, and this was just scrolling through Instagram, which I'm not really big on social media, but the girl who got killed on that train, She was the Ukrainian girl. I can't remember her name. I'm actually going to look up that name. She was killed in South Carolina. She basically just got stabbed. And it really bothered me that it was a black man that killed her. Like, yeah, so her name was Irina Zarudska. She was a Ukrainian refugee. And I live in a place with a lot of people from Ukraine, a lot of people from Russia. And I'm learning Russian right now. And I was learning Ukrainian for a while. And I have friends, you know, Slavic friends who are, you know, blonde hair, blue eyed, brown haired, blonde eyed, you know, brown eyed, blonde hair. Just people that look like Irina, right? Like, I have friends who look like her. And the image of this man, because I made the mistake of watching the video because I had no idea what was going on. And I was like, what the heck? And it was just like popped up on my feed and I didn't even know what I was looking at before. And then, you know, you just see him like just stab her. And it's horrific. I don't think anybody should really look at it. And there was a lot of commentary on how people were scared and how people weren't empathetic towards her because of the immediate danger. And stepping away from judgment, I'm not really here to judge anybody. The reality is, as human beings, we're so needlessly complex because we've been engendered to stick to systems and to policies and to ways of living that are naturally built to confuse us. And that's most people, right? It takes a tremendous amount of work to live by your character, to live with integrity, to the point to where I truly cannot fault people for not doing it. And my life's journey is making sure that I'm living in alignment with my integrity so that if that circumstance were to happen, I would show up in a certain way. But once again, I can't even guarantee that would happen because I'm not in that circumstance. So I don't judge anybody for how it happened. Having said that, watching this man walk through the CCTV, knife dripping with blood, it was like this horror scene movie. It was like a movie horror scene. And I was like, this is like one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. Like, I've seriously, like, because I don't watch like death videos. Like, there are people who like watch beheading videos and all this crazy stuff. I just think that's wild that you would put that in your head. And so this was like the closest thing I've seen to like a legitimate death on screen. You know what I mean? Outside of like, you know, some bomb being dropped on somebody, like in some super impersonal military footage or something like that. But this was like really close to home, and it bothered me, like really, really shook me. And what I found interesting was the impact that, because I didn't watch the Charlie Kirk video, I haven't watched it, I'm not looking forward to that. I wouldn't watch his content anyway, so I'm not going to go and try and looking forward to his death. It bothered me the same way. Like, I thought it was just so tragic. And it's not the fact that they died, right? Because everyone's going to die, right? I don't know if you know. Newsflash, you're probably not going to make it 100 years from now. I mean, I am, but I don't know about you. But it's because I'm a genetic monster. But the reality is that most of us are going to die. But the idea of getting murdered and killed by another human being, that's wild. And I realized that's actually the thing that really upset me. Like, what does it mean for another human being to go out of the way to end another human being's life? Like, what is that damage, that irrevocable turn of the psyche that creates someone where you feel so disconnected from another person's sense of being that you're willing and able to just go take them out like that? Like, for me, that's just wild. And sorry if you hear this buzzing. That's my computer fan. My computer's been working way too hard. But yeah, so it's really just that, like this idea of what the heck is going on. And I'm just really, I just turned off my camera. So no more secondary angles, just this primary angle from now on. So I'll be looking at this camera. But yeah, guys, just this idea that a human being would be willing and able to just kill another human being, that's wild. And the thing is, now most people would say, well, I'm a good person, I would never do that. The reality is, like most people, I'm working on restoring my faith in humanity. That is a legitimate point of focus for me. Generally because, I don't know, I don't think most people are cowards. I just think most people are disposed towards cowardice, right? And I'm not necessarily targeting any particular demographic or whatever. I just think human beings, we've forgotten what it means to be powerful. And I think this is all kind of the result of the world we're living in, right? Where we have all these advances in technology, our capacity to communicate is stronger than ever. We have all the means to live the very best lives we can, and yet so many of us discard those opportunities because, some petty trauma or whatever. And so a lot of what I've noticed, and especially when I talk with artists and authors, right? That's what I see. I see this again and again and again. And today I wanted to actually talk about, in regarding this nature of this death, right? Because Charlie is dead. Irina Zarutska is dead. But if you're listening to the podcast, you're still alive. You still have a life you can live. And I don't know what that 23-year-old girl had for her plans. I don't know what Charlie had for their plans. But they're not going to be able to lay them out in this timeline anymore. So that's where I want to ask you guys, what are your plans for this timeline? So, and before we jump into that, I wanted to also, as we explore this question, I wanted to put it out. So in about 3 weeks, I'm closing the doors on personal case studies. As you guys know, I'm an author coach, or if you don't know, I'm an author coach. I support people to write their books, finish a book in 90 days or less, and get that draft out there. I'm expanding my program and working with their personal development to create a platform and help people build sustainability, so learning how to monetize it and live the life I am. Because in spite of everything and all my shortcomings, I'm still able to write books and live my life full time by helping other people. And so one of the things I've been wanting to do is expand that. So I'm doing 3 case studies. I've worked with dozens of clients in the past because I'm starting a project at the beginning of 2026 to really expand, and I want to help people work with these case studies. So if you're interested in that and you want a heavy discount on my program, apply in the link below, or just look me up on my website, Oni Onyabor, just on Facebook, or Oni_Prolific on my Instagram. Set up a time and check it out if you're interested in applying for a case study. Anyway, going back into that, speaking of case study, I've been making a personal case study of my own life because I realized there was a time when I got very comfortable and I was able to do what I wanted to, and I realized I didn't have to work very hard to get it, because once you know certain things, it's kind of like breaking the matrix a little bit. But there was an emptiness to all of that. And there's something about experiencing other people's deaths and the finality of it that really hits home. Now, I'd had one personal thing that had happened was at the beginning of this year, actually technically the end of last year, I found out my father died. Now, if you don't know much about me, I had an estranged relationship with my father. It's not estranged, we didn't know each other, right? It was estranged because of my mom, and there's a whole bunch of drama that I'm not going to put out on this podcast. But basically, didn't really know my dad at all, right? And there was a completely different narrative about things that had happened that came out to light a few years ago. And when I spoke with him, then I knew now. And so I grew up always being the baby, the second of 2 brothers, and come to find out my father had a whole other family, and I have these 3 other brothers. And so now instead of being one of 2, I'm now one of 5. And I have this whole other family that I had no clue about. And so just like how, I don't know how to explain it. The death of my father completely changed the context of my life, and I didn't inherit a bunch of money. I didn't inherit, some kingdom or whatever. I inherited the knowledge that I got these 3 other brothers, and also there's a finality to the idea that I'll never know him. So I was just saying, just like Charlie Kirk, just like Irina, just like everybody else who dies, the possibility of knowing my father died with him, but only in the sense of knowing him personally. But I can still come to know him through my siblings. I can still come to know him through his work. And so many of us here on the planet Earth, I would ask yourself, what is it you're actually creating? What's that legacy, right? I know for authors, sad to say, many of us are cursed with these tiny little egos that want to be remembered for legacy and do something more, but then rarely having the courage to really step into that. And that's why that personal development aspect of life is so important, because so much of being a writer is the capacity and willingness to have experiences to write about. And I think one thing I've noticed, and I've been a little bit, I'm not necessarily going to go hit it hard, but recently in going in writing circles, one of the things why I took a step back from working with writers so much is I found out so many writers, they have these ideas and they look at entertainment and storytelling as just a means of escapism. They think, well, I have this terrible, awful, shitty life that I don't want to live, so I'm going to write this fantasy that I escape to, and then hopefully I can help other people escape too. And it's hilarious because they think that's why people read. They think that's why they read. They're like, oh, I'm reading because I don't want to deal with my life, so I'm just going to escape over here, right? And that's creating, you guys know what that is when you have something that you create an escapism for? That's addiction, right? So that's otakuism, that's like deep escape fandoms, and it's always filled with these people who are super undeveloped, not really, and like they're nerdy, but they're not very intelligent. And I have a question, do any of those people actually make an impact? And also another thing, did anybody you know that wrote a significant piece of work ever come or approach life that way? When you think of your J.R.R. Tolkien's, when you think of like a Brandon Sanderson, when you think of a Robert Jordan, when you think of J.K. Rowling, were any of them being like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to escape from life. I'm just going to escape from life and just create this fantasy world and not face what's going on here. Is that what inspired them to do it? Because from what I remember, when Harry Potter was written, she had this idea, but she had to take care of her kid, but she got a job, she was going to get taken off of social welfare. She's like, man, I'm just going to put my axe to the grind and write it. And so she wrote this book. And so many of the first scenes were actually things that had come in Azkaban because she was writing about the mentors and the depression she was suffering from. And if you look at like Tolkien, dude literally invented a whole world and language just so he could tell these 3 stories, and then wrote another book as a precursor to the books he wanted to write. Like, this is how devoted these people were to their craft and trying to understand what they were doing, because they were shooting for something more, right? They were trying to build something because there was this life. It doesn't sound like they were trying to escape their life. It sounds like they were trying to move towards something. And that's one of the biggest things I see in the difference between the authors who talk about writing versus the guys who do it. Because running away from something and, you know, kind of the emotional and mental masturbation of telling yourself this story and getting other people to listen to it when you haven't written or put any words down is exactly why so many people are stuck. I remember 10 years ago, I had only finished 1 book. And actually, no, I'd finished 2 books exactly 10 years ago. I'll even say 11 years ago because I got stuff done. I remember when I decided I wanted to write a book. And that happened in 2009. And I didn't write anything for 5 years. I was paralyzed. And I started keeping a journal. I started just doing everything I could to write. Because I wasn't necessarily finishing or working on the book I wanted to work on, which was The Wind of the Waves, which we're going to get to that. That's a really important one. But one of the things that I saw again and again was that I wanted to make this story right, make this story perfect. And so I started building this step ladder. I wrote a bunch of these other stories in these books that I'd had. And then lo and behold, 11 years later, I've 9 books under my belt. I've published 6 or 7 of them, depending on how you count, right? Because I have a compendium out there. And I'm not making a ton of money from them. I haven't really blown them up or marketed them or put a tremendous amount of effort through them. But with that and other efforts, I've been able to eke out a little bit of a living. And in all that, one of the things I came to see was I suck. I'm not the greatest writer. I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not the best looking. I don't necessarily have the most inspiring backstory. But one thing I do have is that I'm willing to step into my own story and live it. I always have been. It's why I speak 4 languages. It's why I'm living in another country learning a 5th language right now. It's why I have a mission and a plan for my life. And I've realized in all of my lack of inspiration, or rather in all of my lack, I've been able to find some inspiration. In my journey, I've been homeless, I've been abandoned, I've been hungry, but I've also, been loved, been in love, I've met and had good friends. I've lost great friends. It's been a journey and a story. And none of that is in my writing. None of that's in my books. But the emotions behind it, right? The actual emotion of what's going on, the nature of what it is I'm trying to do. And I think when we speak about the nature of things, we always think of death as being like this finality, but really death is this graduation. And I realize in order to move forward, you do kind of have to die. The old you that talked about writing has to die, and the new you that writes needs to be born. And the problem is too many people are trying to step into two worlds. And I want to hit you guys with this idea of divine design or death. And what that means is that either you're going to do something that is in line with your divine destiny, mission, whatever sense of destination you have in your mind, or death, meaning that I'll put an end to it and die. But it also means that regardless of what you're doing, that you're choosing a path where you're fulfilling yourself. And how many of us are walking and living in other people's agendas? This is one of the things that bothered me about the Charlie Kirk gift. Because when Charlie died, so many people are making all these statements about his death and trying to horseshoe it into their political agendas. Trying to say, well, this is why abortion's bad. Or, well, this is why, you live by the sword and you had it. And there's people who legitimately don't feel empathy because, like, I disagree with the guy's politics, therefore it's good he died. Like, just nerdy, lame, human loser shit. Like, just some of the craziest takes I've ever heard of my life. And I'm just like, oh my God. Just losing so much faith in humanity. Some of the things, I had one person, I followed her. She was talking about how she felt no empathy for Charlie because he showed no empathy to others. And I was like, yeah, you're really going to make the world a better place because he was an asshole. You're going to be an asshole too. Like that's totally works, right? And so, and she just wrote this wild post, and I was like, I cannot believe you like actually can functionally write that. And it's funny because if you were talked with her, she would assess herself as someone who's empathetic, caring, loving, and kind. And it's like, dude, Hitler was nice to Aryans. Hitler respected Aryans, right? But he's still considered one of the worst human beings in human history because of how he treated those he didn't like, right? So you are not defined by how you treat those who you prefer. And there's no virtue in being nice to someone you like or someone who gives you something. Like, there's no virtue in that. And so, yeah, I just thought this was really, really upsetting. And so I actually wanted to talk about this the last little bit because you know what's funny? Charlie Kirk, Irina Zarutsk, and my father. Those are three real-life deaths that I would say have had a large impact in the public sphere. Obviously, my father being more personal, but I didn't really know him. And like I had this, my relation with my brothers and stuff. But you know what was the death that really had the most impact? It was a death that was so foundational that I actually made a major life change in my life. And that change I want to talk about actually is, so in those who are doing my case studies, in this podcast, every single day, I'm going to talk about my current work in progress. So that work in progress, the Wind of the Waves that I'd gotten the dream for, I had a dream about it. I'll tell you guys all about it next time, so you guys will have a reason to come back. But I've decided to start working on that project, and I wrote the first chapter of that dream after I experienced this death. And it was because I had written a bunch of stuff for that book before, but I'd realized that if I died, that's the one thing I want left behind. And my goal is that in 60 days of this from here, so I'm telling you guys, I'm going to put this out there, and it's the end of September, and the idea is before, so I got 60 days, I'll give myself 90 days like everybody else, but before the end of the year, there's going to be at least a first draft and probably an edited draft of that book done and pressed, because I know how to do it. I know how to write a book in 90 days. I've done it several times. And I'm going to have it out there. And it's going to be a quality book. It's going to be the best book I've ever written. Now, that might not mean it's the greatest book ever written, but it'll be the best book I've ever written. And so that's my commitment to you guys, and I'm putting that out there. But let's talk about the death that inspired that. And that was actually, so I'm actually going to do spoiler alerts, right? So I'm going to talk about a game called Clair Expedition 33, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Fantastic game. You can get it on your PC. You can get it on your PlayStation 5. Play it. If you're going to listen to what I'm going to say, get off the podcast now. Like, subscribe, follow, apply for the personal case study mentorship if you're interested. If you're going to play Clair Obscur, thank you so much for joining it. Take off. Stop listening to the podcast because it's about spoiler alert. Now, if you have played Clair Expedition 33 or you just don't care about the spoiler, I'm going to jump into it now because we're going to talk about death, because this game is literally all about death. The premise of the game, guys, is there is this giant entity, this being that lives in the world named the Paintress, and there's this giant stone monolith that sits in like the middle of the continent, and it's got this giant number that's written on it, and that number represents the age of everybody who's going to die in the city of Lumiere and all the human beings that are existing in the world. So in Lumiere, it started on year 0, which was age 100. And basically, for 67 years, people have just been getting whittled down little by little. So now, the game starts as you're one of the oldest men in Lumiere. You're 32 years old, and your name is Gustav, right? And Gustav, he's leading out in what they call expeditions, where they go and they send people who are going to die or people who volunteer to try and go figure out how to stop the Paintress and what the heck is going on. So the Paintress writes this number down, and they're going to go through this ceremony called the gommage, which in French, if you guys know, means erase. And basically, at the gommage, everyone's erased of that age. So it was year 34, right? Well, it's actually year 68, but like year 34, everyone gets erased that's 34 and older, or turning 34, and then boom, they're all done. And then Expedition 33 then heads out to go figure out what the heck is the Paintress, what the heck is going on, and try to stop her from erasing the population of the world. It's a super amazing story, super interesting. Huge spoiler alert now. So again, I'm going to put you guys off because there is so much death in this game. There's so many people dying. There's a lot of tragedy. And it's a turn-based RPG, kind of like in the style of Final Fantasy, old school Final Fantasies, but it's got a modern twist where you can like block and you can attack with turn-based mechanics as well as live action mechanics, and it's an absolute superb. It's the evolution of RPGs for the 21st century, and I really do think in like 2025 it'll probably win Game of the Year. It's one of the best games I've ever played. But what was really amazing, and the reason they put 33 is because there was only 33 core devs on the entire development team. Actually, I found out the 33, one of them was a dog and like 2 of their pets, so there's really only 30 core members. And they had some outsourced work or whatever when you look at the credits, but 30 people made this game. And it sold and made like $200 million or whatever, and it cost them $6 million to make because they were just poor little French studio. So they just went and made just a truckload of money. They just killed it, right? And they're doing really well now. And you realize all the passion that was put into it and how they really stuck to their guns, and they were super invested in making it work. So again, I know I've sold you on this game, and if you're still listening and you want to play it, go play it now, because I'm about to get into spoiler territory, but I'm trying to sell it to the people because I do want you guys to experience it for yourselves. But again, I also want to talk about it. So go, listen, play Expedition 33, then come back, listen to what I'm going to say next, because there's a really, really huge spoiler. So there's 6 core characters, right? 2 of which don't come until later in the game. So the main character is Gustav. He has this adopted daughter / sister, right? Because, you know, the oldest man and the youngest person, there's only like 30 years of difference between them. So she's 16, he's 32, so he's like adopting her and taking care of her, and he's the oldest man, one of the oldest men in Lumiere. So he's taking care of her. Her name's Maëlle, and she was like this orphan, right? And so Gustav and Maëlle are also joined with Lune, who is this really clever lady. She's super invested in like trying to understand the Paintress and set up a plan to help the other expeditions. and then CL. So CL is, you get her a little bit later on, but she's a farmer and fights with sides and tarot cards, and she's actually way more interesting than I thought she was. She's actually one of the more interesting characters. But at the beginning, I was just kind of like, who's this random chick later? Because you go through so much of the early chapters with just the core three of Maëlle, Lune, and Gustav. And so one of the difficulties as I was going through the game was kind of understanding what is the direction of it, because you're trying to go fight the paintress, stop the gommage from happening, right? But then as you start moving on, there's this little backstory that starts to open up, and you start realizing that there's more to the mystery than is going on. And once again, it's not like traditional RPGs that have this big sprawling world, all these different nations and people. In here they have mystical creatures, gestrals, all this stuff, but it is a very it's a very focused game. Like, the mechanics and the presentation is that of a turn-based RPG, but the thinking behind it very much operates almost like a first-person shooter or like a Call of Duty, in the sense that there's a mission, you're here to accomplish this mission, there are objectives, and it's not like this explore, like Final Fantasy VII, like, oh, well, we have this general thing, but there's this bad guy or whatever. Like, it is very much like these guys are warriors who have gone out, these expeditioners are going out with a mission to try and take down this paintress, and they're just making their way, and it's very harrowing. So it doesn't have the adventuring vibes of a lot of stories, in the sense that there's this openness or the sense of relief. There's this sense of tension and dread hanging over the entire story. Like, it never goes away. And that culminates in the end of Act 1 when you fight the Lampmaster. So again, if you haven't fought the Lampmaster, you don't know what I'm talking about, go play Expedition 33. This is your last warning for the spoiler. But then, because after you fight the Lampmaster and you're headed off to go meet the paintress and go fight her, so you've played the game. If you're really taking your time or whatever, I was taking my time. I got here at about 15 hours. 15 hours of the game is when I got to this point. And the main character, Gustav, right, who you've been playing for the first, 15, 20 hours of the game or whatever, he gets killed. I'm not going to say how or when, because I do want you guys to play the game or whatever, and I don't want to spoil anything. But you should know that the main character dies. And I thought, because there was these little icons in the bar, I thought, okay, well, he's going to be able to unlock other abilities. Maybe he comes back. No, guys, he's just dead. He's just dead. And I was in hella denial about it. And it wasn't until, like, that, I didn't play the game for a week because of that death. And I remember I started redoing my plans for my business. I started working on editing some things. I even went through and reworking my finances so that I could hire an assistant to help me with my work. And I started just getting real about all my plans. And it was fascinating. I remember writing in my journal and asking myself, why did this fictional death of this fictional character, who I bonded with for maybe 15 hours, why was he affecting my life so much? And I realized it was because, in Gustav I saw myself. And I realized, just like that, how Gustav gets killed on his mission, doing the things he's meant to do, he got taken out. And one of his lines throughout the whole game is, for those who come after. And he was always thinking about that other generation because he was so mindful of the other expeditions. And what was so amazing about Gustav is that he believed the expeditions would work. He didn't believe they would ever get a countdown to year 0. He legitimately believed that Expedition 33 would end the crisis, which it does, actually. Spoiler alert for the game. But trust me, there's way more than just the paintress. There's more to it than meets the eye. So again, if you haven't played it, go play it. Because his death just happens in Act 1, and there's 60% of the game left. So if you waited till then and you're like, well, I should go play this game, go play this game. It's incredible. One of the best games, like top 10 games of my life. Incredible game, incredible story. And it got to the point to where, yeah, it affected my life. I started working and making plans and doing things. I started executing, talking to people. I got serious about what wasn't working. So I started saying no to activities and people and things. I started restructuring my whole life because of this fictional character's death. It happened about, I remember I played it was about 6 or 7 weeks ago. And a couple of weeks after that, I was like, okay, I got to scale my bit. I got to start doing the work because I was having existential crisis. I was like, I don't really want to work with authors because a lot of y'all are egomaniacs and lazy cowards. Just kidding. You guys are awesome. I love authors. No, but there's a lot of you guys that, like, you guys got to understand, in human beings, I love people. I love people. Having loved people, I lost a lot of faith in people because a lot of people, y'all hold yourself back because of trauma or difficulties or whatever's going on. You're just making excuses. And I say just making excuses. I'm not saying just grind through it. I'm not saying just power through it. But what I'm saying is that, like, if a dude who got diagnosed with clinical depression was in a culture where he looked different, acted different, and was on the spectrum, got hit with all this different stuff, if someone who has been as far down the loser hole as I have been, where no family, no friends, nobody cared about me, if I'm able to come out and say, you are making excuses, you're making excuses, I'm sorry, right? Now, I don't have any physical ailments, I don't have any, like, there's a lot of things, so I'm not going to pretend and say everything, I'm not going to sit here and judge your journey or your process. But what I am going to say is that if you have a dream inside of you, if you have a book inside of you, the only reason that exists there is because it is a potential. And if it wasn't able to be done, you wouldn't have thought of that. Dude, there's so many idiots and people running around who don't have anything inside of them. And it's because they don't have any dreams. They're not trying to unleash or build anything. And you ask them, hey, what do you think? You ever want to make anything? They're like, no, I just want to, eat chips and drink soda and, masturbate to porn and just waste their life. That's all they want. There's nothing there. And it's like, all right, well, that's what you're going to do, man. That's what you're going to do. And once again, no judgment, but I'm just saying there are people who are here and meant to create things, and there are people here who are just meant to consume things. And if you're a creator, but you're living like a consumer, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel like hell. You're going to start hating yourself. You're going to have a sense of self-loathing. You're going to beat yourself up because you just need to get your butt in gear. And if you need help, again, apply for the mentorship. See if you can get in. I only got 3 slots left. But then I'm also creating a community for like-minded people to help support this because I do want to create authors. I do want to create creators. I want to support people. I don't want to create them. I can't create it. I'm not your God. But what I'm saying is that I know what it takes to get there. And I've seen that, guys, at the end of the day, we have to just decide. For me, losing my dad wasn't enough. Seeing these people die in the news, it shocked me. But what really made the difference was a fictional game. A character in a fictional game dying. How many games kill off the main character in the first 30% of it, right? That was a wild choice. Those guys knew what the hell they were doing. It was a wild, because you think, oh, he's going to come back, there's going to be something. No, bro. He's just gone. He's just dead. And it was like this sense of finality, all this work, all this progress. It gets put onto another character called Another Character later, Verso. I'm not going to get too into it because I do want everybody to play the game. But it just hit this idea that I can't transfer my stories, my ideas into somebody else. Now, what's interesting is that when my dad died, one of my brothers, he told me that a lot of the ambitions and the things I had, my dad had wanted to do, but my dad had never been able to do it. And I thought to myself, maybe that stuff lasts in the genes. Maybe it sticks around that way. Either way, whether it's for my dad, whether it's for my mom, I'm helping fulfill both of their dreams by living and fulfilling mine. So I just want to challenge you, what is your divine design? What is it you're meant here to do? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you have one life. And when that life's gone, when that fire is extinguished, all we're going to have are the impressions that it could have made or the impressions that it did. So I just want to encourage you guys all, if you have something inside of you, get it out. Put it out there. Do the work. If you need support, it's here. At the very least, listen to the podcast, like, comment, subscribe, get some motivation, and just start acting. Start putting some stuff in gear. We're going to start talking specifically about all the mechanics of how to do that. I'm going to be starting the project Starting very next episode, I'm going to be dealing you guys and doing an update. I'll do an update on every single chapter or work progress that I make in the book. I'll get like a chat GPT summary to tell you guys what I'm doing, just to let you guys know about the story, how it's going. I also think I might make content for it, like Instagram or some post reels or something like that. Probably nothing that I'll be posting right away, but I'll put it down somewhere. Have a bit of a workflow with it, because that's what I do. And yeah, and then the idea is that as I work through that process, I can help you guys process. Because the reality is a lot of what blocks us from moving forward is like our trauma and blocked emotions, and that's what makes it difficult. And that's what we're going to talk about next time, is how does our blocked emotions and our traumas affect our writing and our process of living our lives and moving forward, and how do we get over that. And that's what we'll be exploring together on the next episode of the Creative File podcast. But today we just want to talk about the overview of the nature of death. We talked about Charlie Kirk, Irina, and my father. We spoke about the impact of Claire Obscure and how a fictional character, of all those real life scenarios, how a fictional character was the most impactful one for me, and how true story relates and touches. It doesn't just help people escape, it helps people confront and conquer. So I hope all is well. Stay happy, stay healthy, and keep creating. Peace.